This is the Jeff Santos Show.
It is the Jeff Santos Show that you are tuned into. We're here every Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 Eastern, 12 to 3 Pacific time. And if you are looking for podcasts, you can go to revolutionradionetwork.com and check it out. If you are in Wisconsin, you can listen to us on tape delay from 7 to 10 Central Time on 92.7 FM there in the great city of Madison, WI. We go from WI to WA, as in Washington State, as in the great city of Seattle, where we find our Renaissance man. He is a musician. He is a great journalist. He is an activist. He is Mark Taylor-Canfield, and he joins us, as he normally does, on every Friday. Sometimes we give him a little earlier, sometimes a little later, but it's usually 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific for the one and only MTC. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, Jeff. The clubs are starting to reopen in Seattle.
Hooray! Awesome.
Place for the band to play.
You know, I should just call you Mark Taylor Hendricks going forward. Maybe that's another way to get your resume in the bands there. I think you're the long-lost son of Jimi Hendrix, because your guitar man is on fire. We get lots to talk about. We can get a little into music a little bit later. The venues are opening up, which is fantastic. But you've been spending a lot of time at the journalist fests looking at immigration issues. Apparently the AP was co-sponsor. They're dealing with a lot of stuff, particularly in Gaza, and their hotel or their offices were bombed by the Israeli military. And, you know, there's so much to decipher there. But talk to us a little bit about, you know, what this forum was about, and, you know, whether or not we have some hope here for nonprofit and progressive media.
Yes, well, it's sponsored by the Institute for Nonprofit News, so INN, and it was co-sponsored by Associated Press and some other big names. The Knight Foundation, of course, doing a lot of that. And so it was a very good place for me to make contacts and meet people who we can work with my organization, Democracy Watch News, in terms of creating some fundraising efforts, some income source for the organization, and also collaborating with other independent and nonprofit news organizations, which has been a big theme of all of the conferences that I've attended over the last month or two. So collaboration amongst independent news organizations is part of this new picture. But there are, yes, many new independent and nonprofit news organizations that have been formed just over the last year and a half or so. Many of them owned and managed by people of color. One great shout out I have to give to Documented, which is a group of mostly black reporters in New York City, but they have been covering immigration issues on an international basis and putting themselves in some very dangerous situations in order to report. So they've been doing great. And I would just say that the takeaway from all of these conferences that I've attended lately have been that, one, we desperately need more community-based news coverage in a world, you know, monopolized by huge corporate media entities. Because as I've mentioned before, I testified before the Federal Communications Commission on the increased consolidation of corporate media ownership, which some of their own commissioned reports, which they suppressed, the FCC, showed that it decreases minority ownership of media and female ownership of media, and also decreases the amount of local news coverage that we get. So definitely we need more on-the-ground, grassroots, community-based news coverage. A lot of people in Washington State get all of their news from Seattle, so they don't really know what's going on in their own neighborhood. Number two, we need to demand more equitable and just media and society, including bringing in a lot more people of color to represent in the newsrooms, in management, and the ownership of media. And that has been a major, major theme. And you can, you know, chalk that up partly to the Black Lives Matter movement and just how effective they've been in moving news organizations to rethink and retool how they cover the news and who they work with. So, as I was saying, we definitely need more representation of people of color in the newsrooms and management and the ownership of media. And we also need to find new models to fund these new media, especially the independent and nonprofit news organizations like my group, Democracy Watch News. So there is a lot of hope because there are a lot of young folks and people of color getting involved with media right now, and they are just not going to settle for the standard white male-dominated newsrooms that we've seen all across the country. So it is going to change, and people had better just step aside and let the new guard take over because, man, they're full of energy, they're enthusiastic, and they're hungry. They're hungry for success and for innovation right now. So I see some good things coming down the pike. I think I've definitely met some really motivated, dedicated people who are in journalism for the right reason, and for that reason, I have some hope for the future, Jeff. I think we have a lot of new people coming up that are going to cause some waves, and it's going to be great for our country as a whole, I think.
Well, I think you're right. I think it's really important for the future of this country that, and for the world for that matter, that we have people who want to go into journalism for the right reasons. We just talked with Joe Sandberg, who I hope becomes governor of California or senator from California in the coming years. And he talks about his faith, and that his view is to do the right thing and to serve and be as a quote unquote public servant. And I look at media in the same way. The profession is to inform people, to better educate them of being aware of what their government is doing. And government means everything from the local dog catcher and city councilor to the presidency. And, sometimes that's just not covered, not very well. Donald Trump doesn't get elected if people understand what the role of the president is, what the role of the Congress is, how they can impact your daily lives. It wouldn't happen. It's a really important piece, I think, and I'm glad to see that the AP sponsored it. That's obviously been a stalwart of the American media for years, and I think we need to really think about that. I know that you every day that you are on the beat, you're trying to do the right thing because you feel that people need to get the real truth. That's why you've been pepper sprayed and beat up by batons of police and so forth. I know. What you've gone through. So, and I thank you for it. We try to do what we can here on the radio airways, but being on the streets is a real valiant effort.
I wanted to tell you that there have been some efforts also in these conferences to discuss the potential government funding of media, which of course happens in many countries around the world. And, we have the Corporation for Public Broadcasting here, and so tax money does go into creating media. There is a concern, of course, about creating a really strong firewall between the funders, whether they're corporate funders or NGOs or nonprofits, and government agencies, because you don't want your news agency to be influenced, especially the editorial department. And then there's also a lot of talk, and this was going on in your European Parliament before the pandemic hit. In that session that I participated in, where we talked about how to create these firewalls, and also how to counter the disinformation and misinformation, which is just running rampant all over social media. And of course, as I said before, there are differing opinions. So the world of journalism does not all speak in one voice on this issue. Some folks are saying, no, we don't want any kind of government subsidies for media. Other people are saying, hey, it's fine. It works with PBS. It works with the BBC. We've got other folks saying that any kind of censorship is bad for the First Amendment, so they don't like the idea that people get banned from these social media networks. You've got other folks calling for it. So there you go. It's a diverse world out there with many differing opinions.
No doubt. No doubt. Hey, I don't usually ask you these generic off questions, but I'm wondering how many young people that you come in contact with, whether through your music associations or covering demonstrations, political activity, what you're dealing with now at these conferences. What is the impression of people that you're getting about Joe Biden? I mean, we have a very progressive listening base, as you know, and a lot of our callers are not quite, enthralled with Biden. Some really think that it's over. I'm sort of hoping that he can be pushed to do the right thing. I'm skeptical. This is a guy who always, looked at the pie and said, give me 10% and I'll call it a victory and go home. Which you can't do as president because you'll end up at the bottom of the barrel because somebody else will eat that pie for you. I'm just wondering what you're hearing in the very progressive city of Seattle.
Well, Bernie Sanders won some counties in Washington State with 80% of the vote during the primaries. Mm-hmm. Bernie has always been very popular in Seattle. Joe Biden is, I guess I would say, only popular amongst the real traditional party. I don't want to say hacks, but the
party elite,
the traditional party, the traditional Democratic corporate wing of that party. But in terms of just the folks on the street and the young folks I talk to, I have never seen any great excitement about Joe Biden. Only relief that Trump had, moved along. But in terms of Biden, he's never been seen as a progressive leader or hero. Not when we have, members of Congress like Pramila Jayapal, representing us who are just really outspoken firebrands for the progressive cause. So nobody's that excited. Nobody was ever very excited about Joe Biden. I think some people just see him as a placeholder. And in my humble opinion, it's an example of one of those situations where when the people lead, the leaders will follow. Because, he needs a lot of pressure, especially from young folks. But even a slightly more progressive agenda for this country would have really helped a lot of people. And one example is some of the COVID relief packages that have allowed folks who traditionally can barely pay their bills and fall short at the end of the month. Just that little padding is actually, I've seen, help small businesses in Seattle, along with the state and local grants and loans, have helped people make it through these really rough economic times. And it wasn't even close to what we've been given to the defense budget. And yet it helped millions of people survive through a very difficult time. So just small incentives, small packages like that. I know in Tacoma, they are experimenting with a basic guaranteed income where they've selected, I think, like 70 families or something as the first trial to give, I don't know what it is, $500 a month or something like that, just to help out, with people of low income. And I think that should be the future, because I've seen how that just a little bit of assistance has allowed people to get through a month without being completely broke. And then once you can put a little bit of money away and you have a little leeway each month, that savings can start to build up, and you can actually start to build some wealth. But it takes a little seed funding, in order to do that, and not often a lot, especially when you're a person low income. It doesn't really take a lot to get you over that hump and get you to a place where you can actually start saving and enjoying the fruits of your labor. I mean, which is what we should all be doing, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, particularly now that a lot of us are vaccinated and things have opened up. And I know that you're excited about that, as a musician and attending, musical venues, to see other bands that come in and so forth. I mean, I look at it, here at Fenway Park, Billy Joel, who I've always wanted to see at Fenway. He's been playing the ballpark for a good decade now, I think. These are things that, you want to enjoy. And, if you have the secondary income to go and do that, you'd like to do it, because today you're talking about $100 ticket, that's maybe a nosebleed seat. So that's where we're at. You're right, and I think it's important for people to be paid well, people to understand what's at stake here, and that's an important part of the whole puzzle. Are you hoping that you're going to see a lot more bands come to Seattle. Talking about the bigger bands of the Pearl Jams and the Foo Fighters as an example of, a couple of big bands that had Seattle as their home. But even some of the smaller bands, you see that things are starting to percolate in the in downtown Seattle and the areas where the venues are located.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there's a Seattle Times article about a lot of the music venues reopening, and I just got a notice. I met the manager for Krumworks, which is a club that's kind of sort of more Berlin style in downtown Seattle, which has been closed for a while. And I have friends who work there, and she was saying as of July 2nd, they are officially reopening. So a lot of clubs are going to be opening next month. Some of them with limited capacity and other strict COVID rules. For example, the Seattle Theater Group, they're trying to buy the Showbox, but they do own other venues in Seattle where the music and theater is performed. And they're playing it safe in their July comeback. They haven't seen anything from the state or the county about post-reopening requirements, although some venues have announced full capacity in July. But the Seattle Theater Group has very detailed, elaborate health and safety protocols. So fans will have to show proof of vaccination or a negative COVID-19 test dated within 72 hours before the show, and they'll have to pass through temperature sensing cameras at the door, and then mask wearing will be required when fans aren't drinking or eating, and an unvaccinated section will be created for folks who haven't been vaccinated, but that will separate them from folks who have been. So, they're playing it safe. Other clubs, I think, are going to be a little bit more open about that as things roll. But what we're looking at is, so for this summer, the clubs are hiring and booking a lot of local bands, which is just great news. So the big touring bands are not ready yet. They won't be touring again until fall. So from now until, say, September or late August, you'll have a focus in Seattle on local bands, which is what I love anyway. I mean, I would love to see the Foo Fighters and talk to Dave Grohl. I would love to, see some of my favorite bands touring. But I live in Seattle and I have my own band, so I'm very concerned about what we're doing here. And I think the fact that the local club will have to focus and highlight the local talent is going to be a really good thing for us here in Seattle. So I'm excited. It's catching some of the musicians a little bit off guard in that they weren't expecting things to open up quite this quickly. But I think it's going to be fun, and I'm looking at all sorts of information right now online and talking to friends about what's been going on. I attended another art walk gallery opening at Steve Gilbert's gallery last night, and he is well known for photographing the Ramones, and he had a packed place. There were tons of people there. There was an outdoor area for people who didn't want to be inside the gallery, but he's been selling art. People are showing up. They're ready to be social again, and it's looking really good, Jeff. A lot of the venues that we've talked about will be having shows, including the Showbox, which is, sort of the love of my life in terms of music here in Seattle. But the Crocodile is moving down to First Avenue from its current location. People thought that it was just going to disappear, but it won't. It's just moving a few blocks away. It's going to take a few months for a lot of these clubs to actually start opening up and having shows. But it's looking like even Jazz Alley was spent, I think, like $150,000 on HVAC upgrades. They're getting ready to open. The Triple Door is going to be opening. And everybody is basically waiting to see what the governor has to say, too, because they haven't been given a lot of guidance in terms of what's going to happen after the clubs reopen. So a lot of the club owners say that they're still kind of sorting it out, and they're not really clear if the state or King County might add more requirements next month after June 30th. A spokesman for the governor told the Seattle Times, unless the event is very large and thousands of people, the event venue can plan for no restrictions aside from the general mask mandate for unvaccinated individuals. And that came from Mike Falk, the Inslee's deputy communications director. So that's the official word from the governor right now, is that If you haven't been vaccinated, you're expected to wear a mask indoors at this point. Outdoors, people have been given the option of not wearing their masks. Although I have to tell you, Jeff, a lot of people complained when all this first started happening and people weren't consistently wearing the masks. Now what I find is that people are so used to wearing them that even when the governor tells them they don't have to, they still choose to wear them.
Yeah,
and
that's how I feel.
See that.
I went to the grocery store today, and I would say 60% of the people were wearing masks, and the other 40% weren't, which is sort of weird because usually it'd be the outlier would be one or two people who were not wearing the masks. It is concerning with all the variants that are still out there and so forth, but it is. I guess the reality is that some people just don't want to have to breathe into that. That mask, that contraption, it's not easy. But to tell you the truth, when you're going inside, not so much outside, but inside, I feel more comfortable that way, at least right now. Maybe as the summer approaches, and it gets, more beach wear and stuff, maybe it'll be time to discard it altogether.
Well, it's not such a bad idea for other reasons. If you think about it, when you're in a crowd of people and you're packed in a tight space,
right,
regardless of whether you're dealing with COVID-19, people have other colds and flu symptoms, and it's not always
Excellent
good for
point.
people who have other conditions to expose themselves to that. So having a mask is not a bad idea. I would always err on the side of caution. If artists want to go up on stage wearing their masks, or people in the audience want to wear them, I say they should have support for doing that. And just to give myself a plug, if you don't mind, Jeff, by the way, my band is getting ready to release our EP. We're still rehearsing because this kind of caught us off guard. We were not expecting to be playing again until the fall. But we do have a song that's called Mother Freedom, and it's up at SoundCloud and YouTube, so anybody can go check that out. And it's dedicated to all the folks around the world that are fighting for justice and peace and freedom right now. And I took a bunch of news clips from Reuters and Al Jazeera and the South China Morning Post and all sorts of other international NBC News and BBC international news organizations, showing people being in the streets, peacefully. But sometimes the police weren't so peaceful because some of them are being hit with tear gas, and it shows other scenes of people getting the water cannons, especially in Hong Kong. But you can check out that music there, and that's, I think, the kind of style of music that we really want to do is stuff that's really energetic and upbeat and based on good old rock and roll. And it feels like it's time to share that spirit and to help add to the innovation that Seattle's always brought to rock music, because you can bet there's going to be a lot of great new bands coming out of this period. People who have been shut up in their studios like me doing their music, and now we can finally bring it to the world. And I can tell you,
it's going to be a great one.
Excited about it.
I think so, Mark. Hey, I got to run, my friend. Have a great weekend. Really always enjoyed Mark Taylor-Canfield. You can follow him on Twitter. Folks, I want to thank Ron Kreider for producing this broadcast. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for listening. Keep on fighting peacefully. We'll be back next week. Big name guests, hopefully some members of Congress. Have yourself a great weekend. Right now, my name is Jeff Santos, and it is my time to say, I gotta go!
The Jeff Santos Show is heard every weekday on this station between 3 and 6 p.m. To listen to podcasts of The Jeff Santos Show, go to RevolutionRadioNetwork.com.
With SRN News, I'm Jason Walker. At the G7 summit in England, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he believes the economy can bounce back from the pandemic.
I think there is the potential to generate many, many millions of high-wage, high-skill jobs, and I think that is what the people of our countries now want us to focus on.
The pandemic, meanwhile, dominating the early discussions of the summit. Leaders of the wealthy democracies committing to sharing more than 1 billion vaccine shots with poor nations. China doing a little saber rattling, claiming the United States and Australia were flexing their muscles with recent naval drills in the South China Sea. That underscores Beijing's sensitivity over the strategic waterway that it claims as its own. Also at srnnews.com, Democrats on Capitol Hill trying to fashion an infrastructure compromise with Republicans, but are meeting resistance from their own party.
A bipartisan team of 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans has crafted a proposal to invest about $1.2 trillion in things like roads, bridges, and tunnels. Progressives are disappointed the compromise leaves out several of their cherished priorities, especially Green New Deal projects. Leftists are even demanding some $400 billion for long-term home care and language to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Bob Agnew reporting.
Federal government has reached an agreement now to restore nearly $1 billion in funding for California's troubled bullet train program. California voters in 2008 approved nearly $10 billion in bond money to build the high-speed rail line connecting Los Angeles and San Francisco. It was supposed to be running by 2020, but the project has been plagued by overruns and numerous delays. This is SRN News. The McDonald's, the latest company to be hit by a data breach. John Scott has details.
Unauthorized activity on its network has exposed the personal data of some customers in South Korea and Taiwan. McDonald's says it quickly identified and contained the incident and that a thorough investigation was done. McDonald's says its investigation determined that only South Korea and Taiwan had customer personal data accessed and that they would be taking steps to notify regulars and also the customers who may be impacted. No customer payment information was exposed. John Scott reporting.
On Wall Street today, Dow Industrial's up 13 points, closing out the week at 34,479. On the tech side, the Nasdaq is up 49 at 14,069. S&P 500 climbed 8 points for the day at 4,247.
This is the Jeff Santos Show on the Revolution Radio Network. Rebuilding America together. Now, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Ron, and good afternoon, Americans, and welcome to the Jeff Santos Show. We are live in Studio A here in the South Coast in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's great to be with you on this Friday edition of the program. We have a fantastic day for you on this 11th of June, 2021. We're going to start it off with Bree Carlson, the Deputy Executive Director of People's Action. Of course, works closely with our good friend Robert Craig, who's the treasurer there, and now, of course, the umbrella group that oversees his Wisconsin Citizen Action, where he's ED. We'll talk to Bree on a lot of issues, including today, Mr. Garland, the Attorney General, talking about voting rights. We'll get into that with Bree. Then at 4 o'clock, we got a special hour. Not only is Harvey K with us, but John Nichols will team up, and we'll have a Wisconsin Badger Malachi Crunch. I don't know who we're going to be crunching, I guess other people in Wisconsin. But anyways, that's a Happy Days reference from my childhood. You now know my age. Oh, my God. Well, we got great ideas from particularly Harvey K. and yours truly. And this will actually be a subject of my commentary today, is how to save the Democratic Party, how to save the Biden administration, and really how to save the country from a collapse of this democracy. That's really what we're talking about. So we're going to get into all of that between 4 and 5 o'clock, a little bit in the commentary as well. And, of course, your phone calls at 772-223-2362, 772-223-2362. At 5 o'clock, Joe Sandberg, of course, co-founder of Aspiration.com, will stop by, hopefully a candidate for governor or senator from California very soon. It'd be great to have him back on and talk to him about all the issues of the day. And we'll wrap it up with our good friend, the Renaissance man of the Jeff Santos Show. MTC will be in the house. Mark Taylor-Canfield will get his thoughts on the latest in Seattle and the music scene as well, and how the openings of the many music venues in that city, and maybe ways to sort of respect the summertime music world and some outdoor festivities there for the great music people of Seattle, WA. Of course, you can email me, jeff@revolutionboston.com. And, of course, always Facebook and Twitter @Jeff Santos Show. I I want to start out with, a lot of people think that, well, some people think I'm a liberal communist, crazy communist. Others think that I'm going to sell out. I'm somewhere in the middle. I must tell you that I am extremely frustrated, as many of you who listen on a regular basis know, that I am not happy with the slowness and the centrist movement, the holding hands, kumbaya with the Republican Party moment that Joe Biden has offered. I am not at all happy with the lack of leadership from Chuck Schumer. I am quite frustrated with the fact that there is not enough pressure from mainstream media to get people on record on where they are on the filibuster. I mean, supposedly there's a handful of people that nobody wants to name that are not for the filibuster. Well, let's see, mainstream media. Let's get people on record. Talk to the likes of Tester and Di-Fi and a lot of these other folks. Get them on record. Actually, Chris Hayes did it, one of the few, with John Tester, who's for ending the filibuster and voting rights. But let's see where a lot of the other ones are. This is where we should be focused. Now, for those of you who think that I should spend 100% of my time in critiquing the Biden administration, I don't think that is fair either, because we have just left the Trump administration, which left us a pile of manure 6 feet high. And in every aspect of government, has left us with vacancies, right-wing zealots who don't know anything about government or could care less about the role of government. And that needs to be explored. We hear, of course, over the last 48 hours that they went after Mr. Schiff, going after his kids and so forth. It's dirty pool on both sides, but these guys take it to another extent. And we need, in the country, to have two parties that are doing the right thing for the country. At this moment, we have a quarter, maybe half of the Democratic Party doing the right thing, and the other half completely ignoring the facts, living in their bubble, particularly in the Senate. And then you have the entire Republican Party completely bought and paid for. And that includes governors and state legislators by the big billionaire types, the Koch brothers, those who have funded ALEC, that put all this outrageous policy ideas. It's really not a policy. It's just basically draconian measures to stop good government, stop people from voting, stop people from getting a free education, if there is even K through 12. They put up barriers there. They put up barriers for public. No doubt. Talking with Joe Sandberg here on the Jeff Santos Show. Again, co-founder of Aspiration.com. You can find out more by going to aspiration.com/revolution and get more details. I want to talk a little bit about where we are in the country today when it comes to trying to get rid of the filibuster, because if you can do that, I'm not saying it's Nirvana, but and not the band either, but it is a very good future. Because what you could do potentially, you could give long overdue D.C. statehood and Puerto Rico statehood. You could go ahead and give more Supreme Court, real Supreme Court jurists, not people who Donald Trump can put on in one term, 3 of them, not winning the popular vote. Talk about, an outrage. You can go on and on and on. We can get police reform. All these things can be done because you can have the 50+1 vote. And if you had D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood, more than likely you will probably add 4 Democratic Senate seats. So you can move in this. So there is hope here. And I know you are a good friend of Ron Klain, the chief of staff to Joe Biden. I have faith in him and a lot of people within his administration, like Jared Bernstein and Heather Boucher and others, friends of, our good friend every Thursday at 5 o'clock here, Rob Scott of the Economic Policy Institute. So there are good things in place. It's just going to take that push from the outside. And I'm wondering if you have faith that we can come together as a progressive entity to put that pressure on Mr. Biden to get us to that next level.
Oh, I don't know. It may take a new president. It's certainly going to take a new Congress. My confidence level has fallen in the last month. We're getting nothing on student debt. We're not getting $15 minimum wage. We're not getting anything on climate and infrastructure package. The vice president traveled overseas to tell people do not come, basically rendering what's said in the Statue of Liberty to be just kidding. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm starting to grow less confident that we're going to get much more from this administration. We may have seen all that we're going to get from this administration with the American Rescue Plan.
Yeah, we got to do a heck of a lot more, and because people will not just sort of be happy by getting rid of Trump and going ahead and moving in a different direction. I think Joe's dog understands that well as well.
Isn't that right? Exactly.
Well, the thing that we just spent an hour with our good friends Harvey Kaye and John Nichols, talking about, whether it's infrastructure, as Harvey was alluding to, or what John was talking about in terms of, making sure that Chuck Schumer is pressured to do the right thing. I really feel that Joe Biden has to take the stand, has to take the bull by the horns. I was too young. You are probably not even born yet. But when John Kennedy came before the American people on black and white TV and talked about the coming crisis in Cuba and the naval blockade that he would eventually put on, or the civil rights crisis, that garnered a lot of attention. Granted, we were in a much different world. It was black and white. I was born in that year. But the fact is that to me, that's sort of how you can change the agenda. I don't think you can change the agenda by sort of saying, yeah, we'll get to that, we got to do it, but there really isn't any momentum behind it. Because if he doesn't do it, it really can't be done by anybody else. He has the biggest microphone, the biggest platform. Your perspective, Joe.
Yeah, I hear you. He's not doing it so far. I'm really worried. Since we talked, like I said, I've grown concerned that we're not going to get much more from this administration. I'm really worried.
Yeah, no, your worries are shared by a lot of our listeners and a lot of our callers, and we're going to go to Minnesota and talk to one of them right now, and that's John from Minneapolis, and get his perspective. This is where we're at in 2021, and if we don't do the right thing and get some legislation passed, we could be living in a very, very dangerous, what he and many others will call the show, talk about in a fascist state, which is not that far-fetched anymore. It's not just a term they use in a history lecture. It's the reality in today's political world. John, you are next with Joe Sandberg. Go ahead. John, are you there? Fortunately, we must have missed John there. All right, let me take you in another direction, Joe. If you look at your state of California, again, what is it? The 5th largest economy in the world. There are a lot of eyes on the current governor. There are a lot of eyes on your legislature. You know, they're bringing up once again the issue of single payer. We talked with Wendell Potter earlier in the week. And, you know, he's still hopeful that, you know, some things in the state's going to happen. But frankly, he is less hopeful in California and more hopeful in New York as they are trying to get a single-payer piece through up there in Albany. I mean, how confident are you that, you know, you think that, you know, a single-payer or Medicare for all type of legislation can happen in Sacramento?
Not at all. It's not going to happen until we have a new governor. Gavin Newsom isn't going to do what's necessary to get it done. Yeah.
Well, I would agree with that. You know, he came in promising this, he ran on it, and he's done nothing but giving it to true Heisman to all the advocates, and that's the unfortunate reality of it all. And let me take you to to another issue that you're very familiar with and we've spoken about, and that is the issue of the homeless crisis in Los Angeles and throughout the state, but more so in L.A. You know, we've seen articles, I've read articles, you know, in the L.A. Times and many other news outlets about that crisis. Can you give us another perspective here? You know, the last time we talked, it would just, you know, it seemingly is just out of control.
It's worse than what you read. It's more widespread than what you read. I'm slightly more optimistic about real action to serve our unhoused neighbors than I am on single payer. I think the pressure is more severe on politicians. So let's keep our fingers crossed. We may see some things move through over the course of the rest of the year. But it's worse than you read. A lot worse.
Wow. Is it at a point now where no matter where you are in the massive city of Los Angeles, every bridge, under any you know, area that it's that's just horrific.
This is not something that's a Skid Row issue. Every part of Los Angeles is faced with this issue because there are just too many Los Angelenos who are unhoused.
Yeah, and the cost is going up and up and up. All right, we did find our good friend John here. Let's continue the conversation with him in Minneapolis. Go right ahead, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I absolutely agree that, you know, our culture has been so warped by ideas that, like, greed is good. You know, all you have to do is think about yourself. Neoliberalism is a pathetic ideology. It's an ideology almost as powerful and maybe even more powerful than in the Soviet Union when they, you know, had Marxism as their official ideology. So, you know, we're recovering as a society from that, and I think that Bernie Sanders, you know, broke through because he talked about issues that were important to people and that would impact their lives. And, wow, you know, like, who would have thought? You know, this is like all of a sudden, you know, everybody's looking at it and just saying, wow, this is so interesting. And they tried to, as much as they could, silence him. But this is a problem. And, you know, it would gather a lot of different people together. Like, you know, for instance, I belong to a very, you know, I would say mostly a conservative church, a Russian Orthodox church. I mean, some people are, you know, left of center, but, you know, the guys that I work with at the cemetery crew, you know, they would love to hear, you know, some decency, some morality. And I think that they would go for you know, they probably, some of them, or maybe even half of them would go for Bernie Sanders. They would have voted for him if he had gotten, you know, the nomination. Gotten elected. Yeah, in the nomination. So, you know, it's there, and it's trying so desperately to break through. And so many people are trying to squash it like a bug because, of course, they don't want to give up their power, including you know, some of the Democrats, like you described, Dianne Feinstein. What does she have to lose? But we have a lot to lose, and we had a lot to gain from somebody like Bernie Sanders, whose policies would have helped stabilize our lives. I don't have $10 million in the bank or $20 million in the bank. I don't live in a gated community, and I don't get to hug, Lindsey Graham. I mean, that was the most pathetic moment I've ever seen in, in
you're right about that.
When she did,
I hear you. I want to give Joe a chance to respond to you. I think you made some good points. Go right ahead, Joe.
Well, you're right about Bernie Sanders. I think he would have won in 16 as well as in 20. And I appreciate the point you made about faith. I think that's a language and a sensibility that we've abandoned too much. For me, the reason I care about progressivism is because of my faith in God. When people ask me, sometimes they're surprised when I answer that I'm progressive because of my faith, but it's the only sincere answer I can give. That's the reason.
Yeah. I think
it's about helping others.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I am left in the progressive world, and I'm also left in the Catholic faith, mainly with the Paulist group, the Paulist Center, which has really laid its foundation down with, helping folks in Central America and El Salvador, and Father Romero and others there in the 1980s as an example. And it's hard, when sometimes people who don't understand the idea of how faith can bring people together, and it's also a personal thing too. But I think you and John do it, and John is one of our regular and great callers, and is at church every week, part of the choir there in Minneapolis. So it is important. I think it's. I would hope that what we're doing in the next 6 months, John Nichols just said, we got about maybe until January or February to get things done, and before we end up in the hole that we may never get out of as a nation. I'm thinking that young people are really going to be a critical hope here. If you look back, again, we were both too young to understand it, but if you look at the civil rights movement, 20-somethings, for the most part, Vietnam War, definitely, 20-somethings, teenagers, that I think we need that kind of energy. It doesn't have to be people who in their 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s can participate, but I'm just thinking that, that's going to be a key thought, a key way if we're going to make change in our time, because I think that they've shown it in the Floyd situation. They've shown it with Bernie Sanders' campaign, particularly in 16, that they can mobilize. Your thoughts in the final minute here.
Well, you're right. It always comes back to organizing. You get the outcomes you organize for. You get the election results you organize for. You get the policy outcomes you organize for.
Couldn't agree with you more. Joe Sandberg, it's great to have you back on, my friend. Again, you want to find out more, you can go to aspiration.com/revolution. Again, if you want to find a recording, a podcast of this very interview, you can go to revolutionradionetwork.com and listen there. We're on a 24-hour clock, so the 3 o'clock hour Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific, becomes the 6 o'clock hour Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific, and so on and so forth. Mark Taylor-Canfield will join us after this commercial timeout.
With SRN News, I'm Jason Walker. G7 leaders pledging to share vaccine and make a better global economy. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson opened the G7 summit. Should not be allowed to leave a lasting scar on the world. Queen Elizabeth hosting the G7 leaders at an evening reception where Britain's royals mingled with some of the world's most powerful politicians. 3 generations of the monarchy attended the event. held on the first evening of that 3-day summit. Swiss authorities will temporarily restrict airspace over Geneva and deploy some 1,000 troops, that to enforce the security for the summit between Russian leader Vladimir Putin and President Biden next week. Temporary measures will also include air policing and airspace surveillance by the Swiss Air Force.